It's become a fundamental part of the narrative around the Hunger Games that its main premise was stolen from the Japanese novel and the 2000 film it was based on, Battle Royale. Both feature children trapped in a deadly game, forced to kill each other off until one remains, all under the watchful eye of a dystopian regime. Upon my first viewing, it was obvious that the main premise was similar to The Hunger Games, but the execution, the characters, the themes, the use of violence, the cultural and political context were strikingly different. There's no definitive way to prove whether or not Suzanne Collins copied Battle Royale. She can deny it, but the similarities are too striking not to spark a debate. So here's the real question. Could Collins have independently written a novel with such a similar premise that later became a global hit? And are these two stories, despite their overlaps in plot, actually exploring very different ideas? Let's find out. Spoilers ahead for Battle Royale and the Hunger Games. Obviously.
Okay, so Battle Royale came first, so we're going to start there. The Republic of Greater East Asia, an alternate dystopian version of Japan, selects 50 classes from across the country to participate in battle royales, where the students are forced to kill each other off until there is only one left standing. The novel focuses on the unlucky students of Shiroiwa Junior High School Class B. They think that they're going on a class trip, but end up on a deserted island, where they have to kill each other off. Worst field trip ever. To ensure everyone cooperates, all of the students have exploding collars placed around their neck. Special attention is paid to Shuya Nanahara, who dedicates himself to protecting Noriko Nakagawa, the crush of his best friend who was killed early on in the game. Koshun Takami, the author, mentions a myriad of influences for the book. He said he had a dream about a teacher ordering a classroom full of students to kill each other. A few friends explained the concept of battle royale from wrestling, and he also drew from experiences growing up in Japan in the 1960s when student protests were rocking the country. The totalitarian regime was heavily inspired by Stephen King's The Long Walk, another dystopian horror book. There is a quote from Homage to Catalonia, George Orwell's 1938 memoir about his experiences fighting in Catalonia during the Spanish Civil War, making it another possible influence. According to an afterword from the 2009 edition of the novel, Takami said that he was actually working on a detective novel, which, considering the final product, did not work out. Originally, Takami envisioned the story to be lighthearted, but the concept of students killing each other rather than fake fighting like they do in wrestling was just too dark, and so betrayal became a fundamental theme.
According to Takami, the level of distrust for your fellow man wouldn't even be comparable. I had arrived at the realization that it wasn't sportsmanlike at all, and I think it was at that point that it became possible for me to write this story.
In 1997, he entered it in the Japan Horror Fiction Awards. All three members of the selection committee admitted that it was the strongest work of the year, but declined to award it because of its controversial subject matter. After polishing it up, it was finally published in April 1999 and quickly became a bestseller in Japan. Each of the students received a survival pack, kind of like this. I bought this in case Mount Fuji explodes.
Let's see, there's supposed to be cookies in here or something.
So, the students have 3 days to eliminate each other. If more than one student is alive after the time limit, the collars will explode. Each student is also randomly assigned a weapon. Some are lethal, like guns and knives, others less so, like pot lids. The film follows the main plot of the novel, but with quite a few changes. I'm not going to go over all of them because it would be pretty tedious, but the main ones include
Kitano replaces the original instructor, Sakamochi, as the character supervising the program. Basically, everything from his storyline was created for the movie. At the time of the film's release, Takeshi Kitano was not only a famous actor and director, but had previously hosted a wildly popular game show called Takeshi's Castle, giving a meta twist to his casting. Kazuo and Shogo are both transfer students who volunteered to participate in the game instead of regular classmates. I think this is a good change as it distinguishes them from the rest of the class and explains why they are better prepared for the game. A lot of minor characters' deaths are altered, probably to save time and streamline the plot. Shuya's parents died in a car accident in the book, whereas in the movie, his mother abandoned him and his father unalived himself. Again, I think this is a positive change. I think it reinforces the theme of not trusting adults. The authoritarian regime from the novel is completely erased. Instead, the democratically elected parliament instituted the program to keep the youth in line. I'll talk more about that later. The famous introductory video is also only in the film.
As you can imagine, due to the film's subject matter, it was considered controversial even before it was released. It received an R15 rating, which Fukasaku considered to be too strict and tried to appeal. The controversy made its way all the way to Japanese parliament, where a bunch of pearl-clutching members said that the film was dangerous to teenagers. Fukasaku, worried that parliament would try to censor the film further, dropped his appeal. The movie elicited the typical talking points that most edgy teen dramas do. Are kids going to start imitating the movies? What about the children? Blah, blah, blah. This naturally translated into higher box office receipts, and it became the third highest grossing film in Japan in 2001. Contrary to popular belief, the film was never banned in the US. Toei executives were advised to not distribute the film in the US because American lawyers told them that they would go to jail if the film was ever released. Honestly, I think that they were probably overreacting. I mean, Final Destination came out the same year, and that's just, if not more violent than Battle Royale was.
It's a violent picture, but like most of Fukasaku's pictures, it's also campy. The blood is clearly paint, people are jumping out of windows and flailing around on the ground. The real concern likely stemmed from its uncomfortable parallels to the 1999 Columbine massacre, which was still fresh in the minds of the American public. As much as I dislike censorship, it's easy to see how a film showing teens mowing each other down with Uzis might have struck a nerve in a country still grieving from that tragedy.
But the damage was done. Toei, knowing that only small distributors would seriously be interested in the film, priced it out of their range and also demanded a wide release. Now, Battle Royale was popular, but it wasn't that popular. Some studios like Paramount and Universal weren't going to take a bite at it, so Toei essentially prevented the film from being released in the US. Now, just because there was no official release doesn't mean nobody saw it. It was released in some film festivals, and there were some bootleg VHS tapes floating around, but for the most part, you kind of had to know what Battle Royale is and be looking for it in order to see it in the US. It was only in 2010 when Toei finally agreed to sell the North American rights to Anchor Bay Entertainment, and the official DVD and Blu-ray was finally released in 2012. Even before its release, producers at New Line Cinema were hoping to produce an American remake of Battle Royale with a tentative release for 2008. Well, we all know what happened in 2008. One night in the early odds, a young adult author and former screenwriter for children's programming was channel surfing. Two forms of programming caught her attention: reality TV game shows and coverage of the Iraq War. These two ideas, side by side, became one of the inspirations for The Hunger Games. Collins was no stranger to televised war. Her father was drafted in the Vietnam War, and she would watch coverage of the war after cartoons. Classical mythology and ancient history were also major influences. The idea of an authoritarian government putting children in an arena forced to kill each other off is reminiscent of the myth of Theseus and the games of the Colosseum. Now, these influences don't prove Collins's innocence, but they do make sense when we evaluate the plot of The Hunger Games. I'm not going to cosplay as Katniss.
Each year, to commemorate a failed rebellion against the capital's power, the 12 districts of Panem are forced to send two tributes, a boy and a girl between the ages of 12 and 18, to participate in the annual Hunger Games, where they will be forced to kill each other off in an arena on live television. Katniss Everdeen, upon watching her little sister Prim be reaped for the games, volunteers as tribute. She, along with her not boyfriend Peta, are sent to the capital to be paraded around and compete in the games.
The film is a very close adaptation of the novel. I suspect that this is not just because of the source material's success. Collins, a former screenwriter, based the structure of the novel on a screenplay. The novel is broken up into 3 acts. It's written in present tense rather than past tense, and it has heavy focus on dialogue and action rather than imagery. I imagine that this made it much easier to adapt. So, if we're going to decide whether or not Collins is a thief, we need to compare and contrast.
A. Plot. This is the most obvious one. The plots are undoubtedly similar. Teenagers are being forced by a totalitarian government to kill each other off in an isolated area. Even though the kids in BR are technically on a deserted island with abandoned buildings and vehicles, they're frequently in forested areas just like in the Hunger Games. Not a good look, Suzanne. B. POV and characters. The Hunger Games is written in the first person from Katniss's perspective, while Battle Royale is in the third person limited, weaving between the various characters in the novel. Although Shuya is our main character, the book explores the thoughts and actions of almost all of the students. The films reflect their novels' POVs. We usually only see what Katniss sees, with a few exceptions, cutting to President Snow, the gamekeepers, or the residents of District 11 and 12 to see how they are reacting to the games. Quite a few characters die off screen, and only 8 of the 24 tributes are ever named because Katniss only remembers the tributes that pose a threat, with Rue being an exception. Battle Royale, even though Shuya is the main character, we go over every student's death, their names and class numbers going up on the screen every time one of them gets eliminated. This is not very effective in the book because all of them being high school students, there's very little variation in their backgrounds.
This is how like half of the character introductions in the book are. Hello, my name is blank. My hobbies are blank. I have a crush on blank. My best friend is blank, and oh my god, I'm dead.
It's clear that Koshin was more focused on the slasher elements and giving the characters horrifically grisly deaths than actually fleshing them out. I can't really blame him. It's just hard to make 42 high school students compelling because there isn't much variation in their lives. The only character I actually cared about in the book was Mimura because his uncle was a former freedom fighter who taught him coding, allowing him to hack into the school. Other notable exceptions include Kawada, a survivor of a previous game who comes back to make sense of his past, Mitsuko, who, after a lifetime of abuse, is determined to win the game by any means necessary, and Kiriyama, who is just a hot sociopath. C. Dystopian world building.
Battle Royale basically just takes place in late 1990s Japan with a totalitarian dictatorship. Now, the government suppresses expressions of Western culture like rock music, but it seems like people still have access to these things. Honestly, I don't think Takami was very interested in exploring how totalitarian regimes operate like Collins was. I think he just needed a convenient setup for the program.
In the movie, instead of a totalitarian dictatorship, it's actually the democratically elected parliament that passes the BR Act to keep the youth in check. It's a small change, but I think it better emphasizes the theme of distrusting adults. After all, who elected these people? It wasn't the kids. Who was responsible for the economy crashing and tens of millions of people out of work? 15-year-olds? Juvenile delinquency is a symptom of greater societal problems. After all, if their parents are out of work and they are being told from all fronts that Japan is cooked, why go to school? Why study hard to be at the top of your class just to end up at the back of the unemployment line? This political and economic angst reflected a harsh reality in Japan. In the late 80s, the Japanese real estate and stock market was in a bubble that finally popped in 1992. The country experienced economic stagnation and a spike in juvenile delinquency. Kinji Fukasaku, the film's director, was a teenager during World War II and was forced to work in a factory to support the war effort. One night, his class was caught in American artillery fire and he had to hide under the bodies of his friends to survive. He also had to dispose of the corpses. This left him with a lifelong distrust of authority and attracted him to making the film adaptation. Fukusaku, remembering his experiences during the war, must have felt some compassion for these young people who were being asked to study hard for a future that had already been sabotaged.
This remains relevant for teens in the US today. While they're going through all of these mental and physical changes, they're also under constant pressure to get good grades, pick the right extracurriculars, get into a good college, pick the right career, and to essentially have their entire life planned out by the time they turn 18, or they're going to be living under a bridge somewhere. All while constantly hearing on social media and the news that income inequality is rising, the job market is cooked, and they'll never be able to afford a home or have kids. Teens are getting this dual message that they have to work super hard and have their entire life planned out just to get ahead in life, and also that there is no future, that they'll never be able to afford anything, and that they can still be laid off just so that their company can hit their targeted earnings. Then, when they try to communicate this frustration on the adults in their lives, their concerns are brushed off as just teen angst.
In the BR film and the real world, the government's response is not to, you know, actually solve society's problems, but to clamp down on dissent. This parallels Kitano's dissatisfaction with his own life. The students challenge him, so he leads the program to reestablish his authority. His daughter challenges him, so he tells her off one last time so he can haunt her with his dying words. He is an incredibly fragile man who, unable to succeed in either his professional or personal life, punches down, taking out his inadequacy on innocent children. People like Kitano are not interested in extending empathy to kids or even teaching them something, but protecting their egos and maintaining power. He loves Noriko because she came to class on the protest day. Not only did she empathize with his pain, she followed the rules. She respected his authority.
I personally prefer the politics of the movie. By getting rid of the authoritarian elements and focusing on modern politics, we realize that the dystopia is already here. Will Amanda ever make a video about a happy topic? Like and subscribe to find out. But there's no getting rid of the totalitarian regime in the Hunger Games. Violence and systemic oppression is weaved into every aspect of the characters' lives.
Panem enforces its dominance through a stark class system. The wealthy elite of the capital live in grotesque luxury, while the outlying districts suffer under forced labor, poverty, and starvation. The annual Hunger Games serves as both punishment for a past rebellion and a brutal reminder of the capital's absolute power. By turning trauma into entertainment, the districts are terrorized into submission, while the capital's citizens are kept entertained, keeping them complacent and desensitized to the tragedies their government creates. The novel exposes how media enables oppression, forcing tributes to perform in costumes and interviews, transforming their suffering into prime-time entertainment. The games are sold to the public as a competition for fame and glory, but for the tributes and the districts, it's a total nightmare. Not only do literal children have to fight each other to the unalive, but their friends and family have to watch. The children of the districts not only have to survive grinding poverty, but live in constant fear that their name or the name of their brothers and sisters or friends will be picked on the reaping. When they grow up, they have to live with the fear that their own children will be reaped. It's no wonder Katniss doesn't want kids. This is not a childhood anyone deserves.
There's also a psychological dimension here. So, you know, when you're watching your sports team and they lose and you just feel devastated, like you didn't do anything, you don't have any control over the game, but the team represents where you're from and becomes kind of an extension of yourself. So when they lose, you feel like you lose.
Duval.
P-chan is a beleaguered Jaguars fan. Every time a district loses the Hunger Games, they feel like losers. It's demoralizing. The capital, by not participating in the games, is symbolically pitting the districts against each other. That way, they don't think to unite against their own common enemy.
Unlike Battle Royale, the Hunger Games are televised. I've seen a lot of articles and people on the internet saying the program is televised, but it's not. This is explicitly stated several times in the book. This is also implied in the movie. The first scene shows a crowd of television crews scrambling to see what is presumably last year's winner. The main news anchor calls out that it's a girl, something everyone would have already known if she won on live TV.
Now, since I myself am sort of being televised, I've decided to take creative liberties with the Japanese uniform. I got earrings on, I got a little bracelet, I have these sunglasses that I forgot to take off in the first shot. I didn't come out here to die ugly.
Okay, so I know that I'm in a schoolgirl outfit, but we're not doing thirst traps. Okay, this is a clean channel, and I want to be recognized for my mind, for the academic analyses that I'm putting out into the world. Okay, we'll do a few thirst traps.
Nice.
Dancing around in my tight dress, tickling myself to the mall, looking there next. Look at me, I don't mean to be like that. Everywhere I go, collateral effect. Yeah.
The official reasoning for the program is military research, but it's also implied that it was instituted after young people began protesting the Republic. By the end of the book, the instructor of the program, Sakamochi, admits to Kawada that, like the Hunger Games, it's a tool of oppression. I'll tell you now, this country needs the program. The thing is, it's not an experiment at all. Come on, why do you think we have the local news broadcast the image of the winner? In other words, everyone ends up concluding you can't trust anyone, right? Which would extinguish any hope of uniting and forming a coup against the government. Hmm? I think The Hunger Games works better as a tool of oppression because it's televised and so meticulously crafted. It warns us that authoritarianism thrives not just through violence, but through the erosion of empathy and the manipulation of narratives. Upon a rewatch, I was so shocked by how little the capital citizens care about the lives of these kids. There is not an ounce of self awareness that what they're doing is just cold blooded slaughter. And the most disgusting part is that, with the live streamed genocide hitting up our phones and social media, we are seeing the Hunger Games play out in real time, kids being openly unalived and starved for the whole world to see. The games are not some revenge ploy, they are a tool to keep the capital citizens complicit in the exploitation of the districts while keeping the latter in a constant state of fear and humiliation. If the government is willing to take your kids away and televise their deaths for the whole country to watch just because they can, imagine what they could do to you if you actually fought back. Peter Bradshaw, writing for The Guardian, noted, how can Battle Royale appall and pacify the populace if it doesn't happen on live television? Fukasaku appears to suggest that part of the game's power is its secrecy. Like some strange, newly invented ritual of adulthood, it is a bloodletting that happens far away from the rest of the tribe.
I mind this less in the movie than in the book. I can understand how people who voted to put kids in a death game wouldn't want to see the consequences of that decision, but it's still weird that the government doesn't want to flex their strength and cruelty on TV. It just seems like it would be a much more effective tool to keep people in line.
D. The use of violence.
Battle Royale falls back on slasher elements while Hunger Games focuses more on sci-fi violence. In Battle Royale, students get mowed down by Uzis, stabbed, shot, they get their heads cut off, sometimes their collars explode, and that's why I'm being very careful about the shots that I'm using in this video. But it's nothing compared to what's in the book. I would share some excerpts, but I don't want to get demonetized. Well, I'm not monetized yet. I would like to be monetized in the future, and think this video's already on thin ice.
By comparison, The Hunger Games is a tea party. Now, I'm sure it's not lovely dying by a pack of mutated dogs or tracker jackers or accidentally eating poison berries, but neither the film nor the book lingers on the grisly details. I know everyone hated the shaky cam, but the filmmakers probably used it to obscure the deaths and obtain a PG-13 rating, as an R rating would have prevented it from being seen by its target market, as that sorta happened with Battle Royale.
Both properties deal with the theme of governments exploiting the lives of children to enhance their own power. But I think that Battle Royale is more than that. But where I think Battle Royale really shines is its depiction of teen angst. And I should know, I'm only 15 years old. Why won't Okada-kun text me back? B-chan!
That's crazy.
Teenagers go through changes with their bodies and their mental health and are under constant pressure to both find themselves and fit in, which can be contradictory. The students of Class B are just normal teenagers. They have crushes, they love their best friends, they play sports, they face bullies, and sometimes they bully each other. Amongst all of this is this feeling of helplessness. You're trying to find yourself and interact with your peers in a world controlled by adults. Finding yourself requires you to make your own choices. This is why rebellion flares. Every stifled decision, every dismissed emotion just fuels the desire to carve out agency in a world ruled by parents and teachers.
Under the unbearable stress of the program, teen angst is taken to its extreme. Friendships break down, bullies become killers, and even your crush can spell your doom. Yeah, your crush is probably not going to shoot you in real life, but getting rejected is kind of like getting shot. Teen friendships can be fragile in the face of competing interests like family, school, or the popular kids. I remember my high school administrators basically treated us like criminals who were plotting to burn down the school. Come to think of it, I'm pretty sure the principal was an ex-Marine. And my parents loved that. They thought it was a great thing that my high school was run like a fing prison because they, like most people, don't trust teenagers. Mitsuko and Kiriyama can be seen as a metaphor for bullies. They never get in trouble because they aren't threatening the school's authority. In fact, by dividing the students against each other, they make it easier to manage the class. Thus, Mitsuko and Kiriyama, by hunting down their fellow classmates, are reinforcing Kitano and the program's power. It only takes 3 days for the students to kill each other off because, with the exception of Shuya and Noriko, none of them can rise above the system they find themselves trapped in.
The school system has developed this illusion of control that if you listen to your teachers, no matter how unreasonable they are, get good grades, tattle on your fellow classmates, and just shut up, you can get to survive high school. Whenever there's media geared towards adolescence that focuses on serious topics, there's a backlash. We saw this play out with the release of the film, where members of literal Japanese parliament didn't think the film would challenge young people to think critically about the systems that they inhabit, but would encourage them to stab each other. Teens can't read boy love manga because then they'll become gay. They can't watch Teen Mom because then they'll get pregnant. They can't read about sex because then they'll have sex. They can't play violent video games because then they'll become violent. Society has this irrational fear that if teens explored the world and were allowed to make their own decisions, that they would choose wrong. So they have to choose for them.
This is why Battle Royale perfectly captures teen angst. While the scenario is extreme, it mirrors the chaotic, hard to define emotions of adolescence, along with the crushing powerlessness that defines the teen experience.
As teens, we all had to play by the stupid rules our parents and teachers made, always suspecting that they were designed more to keep us under control. Battle Royale tells us that yes, you are right to distrust adults, and no, the rules aren't just designed to keep you safe, and playing by them won't save you.
That said, The Hunger Games does not really explore teen angst at all. Claire Armstead, writing for The Guardian, wrote, though Katniss is 16 in the first book, is buffeted by all the familiar teen emotions, the desire to be special, competing with a wish to belong, Collins insists the series is not a metaphor for troubled adolescence. In a rare interview with the U.S. School Libraries Journal, she said, I don't write about adolescence. I write about war for adolescence. I can see that. I think the politics of the Hunger Games makes it difficult to read Katniss as just your average teenager. Unlike most of the characters in Battle Royale, except for Mitsuko, Kawada, and Kiriyama, who are just normal teenagers thrust into a death game, Katniss has been in survival mode since she was a child. After losing her father, she needed to become the breadwinner for her family to survive. Katniss' experiences are closer to that of a child growing up in a third world country, forced to grow up quickly. That's part of the reason why she wins the games. She can shoot a bow and arrow, hunt, identify edible plants, build fires, and climb trees. Katniss is not your average teen. In the districts, that's a luxury few can afford. A prominent feature of the book that is unfortunately mostly lost in the film adaptation is the hunger. Starvation is an ever-present threat in District 12. When Katniss's father died, her mother fell into a deep depression and the family almost starved to death. At just 12, she needed to sneak out of the district and hunt just to keep her family alive. The woods became our savior, and each day I went a bit farther into its arms. It was slow going at first, but I was determined to feed us. I stole eggs from nests, caught fish in nets, sometimes managed to shoot a squirrel or rabbit for stew, and gathered the same wild plants my father had taught me to recognize. It's not just Katniss's family who suffers food insecurity, but the entire district. One of the most famous quotes from the book is, District 12, where you can starve to death in safety. Children can add their name to the reaping multiple times in exchange for tesserae, or barely a year's supply of grain and oil for one person, showing just how dire the situation is. Yet there's plenty of food to go around the capital. Throughout their time in the capital, Katniss and Peeta are served extravagant meals while the families in District 12 are struggling just to survive. How can the capital have so much food while District 12 has so little? It's because the capital controls the nation's resources, and they keep the best for themselves. Hoarding food is just another way to keep the districts weak and dependent. If people are starving, they're too exhausted to fight back. The institutionalization of hunger is perhaps the most insidious injustice. It not only leaves the populace in a constant state of pain and anguish, but deprives them of hope. Katniss only survived her childhood ordeal because Peeta purposely burned a loaf of bread to give her. The bread gave her hope, a reason to keep fighting, something the capital has been trying to take away from the districts since the founding of the games. And it's not just food. The people of the capital have better clothes, luxurious homes, endless entertainment, and the comfort of knowing their children will never be reaped. They're perfectly fine exploiting the districts as long as they get to keep living in comfort. The extreme inequality on display is class commentary at its most obvious. I think it's pretty clear that Collins did not rip off this theme from Battle Royale.
Well, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. Is Collins a thief? Suzanne Collins claims that she had never heard of Battle Royale until she had already turned in the Hunger Games to her publisher. Her publisher was familiar with the book, but advised her not to read it so that she would not get influenced by it. Already too late, I guess. A lot of people didn't really believe Collins because, hey, not only are the premises really similar, but the book and the movie were pretty famous internationally. How is it that she had never heard of it before? As previously discussed, it was very difficult to see the actual film before 2010 in North America unless you were actively looking for it. But I think the strongest case against plagiarism is just how far both properties diverge. They both have completely different approaches to the subject matter, POV, world building, and themes. I have to imagine that if Collins was seriously ripping off Battle Royale, that she would have taken more than just the premise. I also saw a Reddit thread about how both properties use bird calls. I mean, they're both in the forest. What do you people want?
Suzanne Dominus of the New York Times reported that the parallels are striking enough that Collins' work has been savaged on the blogosphere as a bald-faced ripoff of Battle Royale, but argued that there were enough possible sources for the plotline that the two authors might well have hit on the same basic setup independently. See, it's not just me.
But what even constitutes ripping off? Everything has influences, and Battle Royale is considered to be one of the greatest films of the 21st century. It even launched the death game genre. It's only natural that other writers would take inspiration from it. Here is a list of but a few works of media that have been inspired by Battle Royale.
Kill Bill, Dead Man Wonderland, The Insight Mill, Alice in Borderland. Oh, look, they're wearing exploding collars. I wonder where they got that idea from. The Purge, As the Gods Will, Fortnite, Squid Game. And those are only the obvious ones, yet no one calls Squid Game or Alice in Borderland shameless ripoffs, even though their influences are much more blatant. I mean, Fortnite literally took the name from the movie. I also don't think it's a coincidence that Battle Royale star Tatsuya Fujiwara went on to appear in films like Kaiji and The Insight Mill. This casting choice was deliberate, leaning into the thematic and stylistic parallels with Battle Royale.
And hey, this isn't the most unique idea in the world. I don't mean that as a diss, it's just that there are quite a few older stories about people being put on islands or in forests and killing each other.
One of the direct influences for BR already mentioned is Stephen King's 1979 novel The Long Walk, about 100 teenage boys forced to go on a grueling march by a dystopian government. Anyone who stops walking is shot. 1954's The Lord of the Flies focuses on schoolboys stranded on a deserted island who, in an attempt to govern themselves, devolve into savagery. The Most Dangerous Game is a 1924 short story about a Russian aristocrat hunting down a shipwrecked guy on an abandoned island in the Caribbean. Putting people in an isolated area and forcing them to fight to the death to solidify power or entertain the public isn't a particularly new idea. Remember, the Romans did it for real. What's more important is the execution.
What are the rules of the game? Why is it being played? What does playing reveal about the characters? What are the themes and ideas being explored? These are the really important questions to ask when we're comparing these two properties.
Hello everyone, I'm currently in front of Shibuya Station incognito. I've escaped the games and I'm currently wanted for the murder of Selden P-chan Pachinski.
What are you talking about? I'm right here.
His spirit lives on.
So, before I make my escape, you're probably wondering, which property do I prefer? Well, I think that they are both trying to explore completely different themes in completely different ways. Battle Royale helps us identify the dystopian elements in today's society and the challenges of being a teenager, while The Hunger Games encourages us to imagine an even more horrendous future, to challenge income inequality and the narratives presented to us by the media. I don't think people will ever stop comparing these two properties, but I love them both, and I don't want to see them pitted against each other. Unless you want to pit them against each other in the comments, make me famous. I want people to focus more on the power of the themes in these properties rather than, the similarities in their plots. Anyway, that's it for me. Gotta go make my escape. I'll see you in the sequel.